Hello. This video is about a very exciting opportunity for the United Parish in the next phase of our life together. It's about something that I hold very dear to my heart and consider important for the way we all live out our faith. And I hope you'll take at least 15 to 30 minutes to review the content of this video and understand what this opportunity will mean for us. Let me give you my take. One of our favorite passages of Scripture comes from the end of Matthew 25 when Jesus, anticipating his crucifixion, tells his anxious disciples a story about what it will be like at the end of our lives, and thus telling them how we should live our lives right now. And in it, as many of you will recall, he says that whenever we see someone hungry or thirsty or naked or sick or in prison, we are to help them, to give them food and drink, to clothe them, to visit and take care of them. And in doing so, Jesus echoes the prophets of Israel in their regular calls to take care of those who are most marginalized and forgotten in society. And I am so grateful that we have a commitment and a legacy at the United Parish for following this charge from Jesus. Through our annual Thanksgiving meal, when we feed hundreds of our neighbors who would otherwise go without this special occasion, or our Thrifty Threads shop that sells and at times even gives away reused clothing, to our support of the City Mission Society and its coat drives, or the Brookline Food Pantry, or the Greater Boston Food Bank's Walk for Hunger, and our mission giving team's ongoing support of dozens of worthy organizations, locally, nationally, and internationally. And this is all good and honorable and faithful work, for which we have many reasons to be grateful and to keep on doing them. And, as Christians, it is essential that we understand the importance of both charity and justice in living out our faith and this call from Jesus. Charity is helping people with immediate needs. It's a kind of urgent care. Justice is a matter of asking why these needs exist and what we have to do to make lasting changes for the better. It's more like public health or preventive care. It involves larger, longer-range work of changing the system, understanding clearly who has the power, building relationships with those power players, real relationships, and effecting policy changes that will have lasting consequences. Throughout our American history, the Christian emphasis on justice helped inspire many great changes: the abolition movement, the progressive era of the early 20th century, the civil rights movement. And in taking seriously the calls for justice from their faith tradition, people developed the tools they needed to make longer-lasting systemic change, to get involved in politics and influence policymakers. And out of it came laws that have had lasting effects for decades. For instance, the Emancipation Proclamation, or subsequently the 14th Amendment, fair labor laws, the Social Security Administration, and other features of our social safety network, voting rights legislation, women's suffrage. But without vigilance, the work of justice is always under attack and threat of erosion. And you and I have seen over the last 50 years the widening economic inequality in the U.S. This past year, the pandemic highlighted this inequality, as well as our nation's unfinished business of fighting and eradicating institutionalized racism. Lobbyists and politicians are always looking out for the interests of those who have money. It's how power, when unchecked, always works. Jesus and the prophets understood this very well, which is why they spoke out regularly and so clearly for justice. Our job as Christians is to look out for the needy and the vulnerable and to hold our political leaders accountable for doing the same. And there's an organization in Boston that helps us do that in faithful, justice-seeking ways, working with people across the religious and ethnic spectrum in our metro area. They're linked up with similar organizations across the country. They build relationships with Boston's mayor, the city council, the police department, the governor, attorney general, the leaders of the legislature who decide which bills get debated and voted on. They figure out how politics is played here in the Commonwealth and work within the system to effect change. It's called the Greater Boston Interfaith Organization, or GBIO for short. And I have been keenly, passionately interested in having United Parish become a part of this organization even before I joined you 7.5 years ago, because I believe it's one of the best faith organizations to help open up the doors for us to have more of an influence in our justice work. It provides us with the organizational tools and strategies for helping to make change. And it puts us in relationship with other dynamic, faithful people and communities in our area. Jews, Muslims, Buddhists, Hindus, multi-ethnic communities, and together all of us are stronger in what we can accomplish. And frankly, joining with these other communities makes justice work a lot more fun, a lot more interesting, and a lot more effective. In joining GBIO, we will also join our immediate Brookline neighbors who have already made this commitment. Temple Sinai, Temple Beth Zion, Temple Ohaveh Shalom, St. Paul's Episcopal Church. And together with them, I believe we can work on local issues here in town like food insecurity and affordable housing. Each year that I've been at the United Parish, I've introduced our members to GBIO through large and small group meetings, through protests, actions with politicians. But now is the time for us to move forward. This year, our Stretching into Justice team is urging us to make both the financial and organizational commitment to join others at GBIO in this important work. They've considered the questions we have about what joining will mean for us, and they've created this video for us all to consider prayerfully what it means to take this next step. So I'm asking you to take some time now to watch it. You can watch the whole thing or simply jump around to the questions that most interest you. But we'd like you to be informed about it because we plan to bring this to a congregational vote at our June all-parish meeting, the second Sunday in June. I sincerely believe that in joining GBIO, we will be opening new pathways for us to live our Christian faith in exciting and life-changing ways in the greater Boston area. This kind of work is a big part of why I got excited about getting into ministry in the first place. So I thank you for your time, for your interest, and for your prayers.
What could United Parish continue to do with GBIO without joining as formal members? And I think I have a twofold answer to that. So the first part is I think the United Parish in Brookline, our individual members or groups from our church or maybe even our pastoral staff, could continue to participate in large GBIO actions as an affiliate member or as an institution in support. But what we lose out on by not being full members of the institution would be we miss out on being part of the background conversations that set the issues or that discuss tactics or that work together collaboratively with other churches and other institutions around the greater Boston area. And I think that is one of the great losses of not being a formal member of the institution, is not being a part of these longer term conversations, and most importantly to me, building the long-term relationships of trust with other churches and other institutions around Boston, many of whom look very different than us and might have different sets of priorities than we do, but have a similar passion to work for justice in the greater Boston area. So the second answer that I would have to this question is, I think in some ways, at some point, we may start to run out our goodwill with GBIO because it is an organization that has expenses. They have a professional organizing staff. They spend a lot of time and effort getting to know the issues, getting to know the politicians, getting to know the companies involved, and all of that requires funds. And so at some point, the United Parish, we would be benefiting from the professional organizing work done by the GBIO staff without contributing to the actual structural power and structural money underlying that work. And so that's a concern that I would have about continuing to work with GBIO but not being a full institutional member, is that at some point we may be taking more than we give back. And I'd want us to think about that relationship.
Hi, Doug.
Hi, David.
I'm David Rockwell, a member of the United Parish and of its Stretching into Justice ministry team. Doug, who is treasurer of our church, and I are here to discuss the church's possible membership in the Greater Boston Interfaith Organization. GBIO, which is a faith-based membership organization of area churches, synagogues, and mosques working together on social justice issues that affect communities in Eastern Massachusetts. The stretching team is sponsoring a series of videos which will help UP members understand what they need to know as our congregation considers membership, which will come before us for deciding at the church's annual meeting in June. This video specifically addresses the financial aspects of membership in GBIO, which is why our treasurer is here with us today. Thank you, Doug, for joining me to discuss GBIO membership and how it affects the church budget. As I said, the church is actively considering membership in GBIO. It's an organization that we have worked with in the past without being a member on shared community and legislative issues. But now we think just maybe the time has come for the United Parish to become a full-fledged church member, along with nearly 60 other worship organizations and other groups in Greater Boston. Member organizations agree to contribute 1% of their annual operating budget to GBIO, in addition to expectations of volunteer participation in their activities. The financial side of this for UP would have been $8,300 in the current budget year. So Doug, if we join GBIO, where would this money come from?
Thank you, David. The decision to join GBIO will be made on behalf of the entire congregation. So the contribution should come from one of our major ongoing funding streams. The two options available would either be the general fund through the annual church budget or the United Parish Mission Fund.
So if the contribution is included in the general operating budget, how would this impact other areas of our ministries?
When a new opportunity like this one is launched, the hope is that the congregation will rise to the challenge and increase giving to support the additional expense. However, it's a little unclear how much individual members will be able to focus on the one item of GBIO within the full church budget and how this will translate into larger pledges. It should also be remembered at United Parish that only about 50% of our annual budget comes from individual pledges. Current uncertainties about building usage income will make increases to general operations difficult in the next year. Based on budget deliberations in the past few years, if there are not increased revenues and we move ahead with this membership, some important budget areas which could receive less funding may include staffing for video recording of worship services, music staffing and programming, building maintenance and repair, and church school programming. As United Parish's financial officer, I feel even though GBIO fees would only amount to about 1% of our operating budget, this is not the best option because it could strain our resources for covering program and building costs.
So if it's not operations, it would be missions. What do you think about using the United Parish Missions resources for this?
Well, I think that does make sense and both aligns well with our faith and is the more financially responsible path. We have a collection of funds at United Parish meant to be shared with organizations beyond the walls of our church, which reflect God's love for all people and offer hope and healing to respond to pressing human needs. This GBIO opportunity gives us the chance to be part of a larger effort to do just that by joining a group with a decades-long proven track record of making a difference in Massachusetts in the promotion of social and racial justice.
So specifically, what funding source on the mission side are you thinking about?
Well, actually, I'm looking at individual offerings to the United Parish Missions Fund.
And why that fund? And if it is used to make the annual contribution to GBIO, what would that money have been used otherwise had we not joined?
Well, first of all, the initial attempt would be to motivate individual members to start or to increase a pledge to United Parish Missions in addition to their general operating pledge. it is likely that GBIO would receive more attention from our UP pledgers and contributors if it's positioned in the United Parish Missions Fund, targeting giving to help those beyond the walls of our own congregation. But if the level of support did not increase, then the impact would possibly be that a smaller dollar amount, by say $8,000 or $8,500, would be distributed to charitable organizations. In recent years, there have been about $26,000 a year that has been pledged and given by individual members to United Parish Missions. In addition, about $14,000 a year has been received from the 3 endowments for United Parish Missions. So we have a base of about $40,000 each year to support mission distributions. This worst case, if we join GBIO and we don't bring in additional revenues, the worst case would be that support for other charitable organizations would drop from 40,000 to about 32,000.
And that's the worst case. And we would hope that it would be better than that with increased contributions by United Parish members to the Missions Fund because of the GBIO opportunity.
Right.
So how do you expect this might actually work out for the first year of membership in GBIO for United Parish?
Well, I especially think the downward impact won't be that big in the first year, because I believe that United Parish's decision to join GBIO will especially be accompanied by some amount of increased missions giving from the congregation. I want to add that this could be helped in the first year by the fact that the GBIO payment, when it has to be made, because the mission fund has set aside some funds in a COVID relief fund we set up. $25,000 of that came from our UP Missions Fund, and only a small portion of that has been requested and used. One option would be for these funds to enable the first year GBIO membership, with the rest also increasing charitable missions disbursements in that first year.
So is the UP Missions Fund the right place to get these funds? What is the relationship, Doug, between GBIO and the mission programs of the United Parish?
Well, reviewing some of the documents in our church and from the ongoing life of the church, I've went to take a look at our mission and vision statements. And the United Parish vision statement states that we trust United Parish to help us focus and stretch ourselves so that we may become better servants of love, justice, and mercy. The visioning process at United Parish brought mission giving and social justice work into a common purpose under our Stretching into Justice ministry team. And GBIO presents us with a perfect and unique opportunity to strengthen that link. By that, I mean that in joining GBIO, we will be using our missions resources to expand and deepen our impact by continuing to give aid to those in need, and also joining a larger advocacy for changing root cause injustices. Mm-hmm. And we're not alone in that tying of missions giving and social justice. Examples of churches I have found where this linkage has been emphasized and implemented include First Congregational Church in Burlington, Vermont, and Rock Spring Congregational UCC in Arlington, Virginia.
And I might add, with almost 60 religious organizations and others who have made the decision in the past to join GBIO, many others in our local area must have found that link to be important to them as well.
Yes, good point.
So, Doug, who will make the decision of which funding approach to use if we do decide to join GBIO?
Well, as these video messages are being prepared, the Stretching Ministry team, the Missions Giving Committee, and the Stewardship and Budget Ministry team are all considering the possibility of GBIO membership for our church and the options for funding the annual contributions. A final recommendation will be made by the Church Council in time for bringing the question before the spring annual meeting, June 13th.
Well, thank you for your comments. To kind of wrap up, I might ask the question this way. Some may, in these tough times, question the church taking on new financial obligations, with COVID hurting our rent revenue and possibly reducing stewardship pledging. How do you respond to that? Why should we do this now?
Well, a good and important question, David. This congregation, time and again, has shown it is prepared to back up its faith with significant commitments of time and financial support. We actually have seen an increase in stewardship pledging in this year of the pandemic. And even with rent revenue dropping, I am projecting we will outperform the budget deficit of $49,000, which we anticipated for this year's budget. With our missions resource showing the capacity, as I said before, to take on this not very large obligation of a little more than $8,000 annually, I am comfortable that if the congregation wants to join GBIO as an expression of our faith and commitment to justice, we are well within our means to do so in the first year of membership and in years to come.
Well, very good. Thanks, Doug. If any of you viewing this video have more questions about GBIO, the membership question, the financial aspects, please feel free to reach out to Doug or myself or Sarah Spencer, who is the convener of the Stretching into Justice Ministry team, and we'd be happy to answer more questions. But with that, I'll wrap this up, and thank you for your time, Doug.
Thanks, David.
There was a question about how does GBIO spend its money? Well, I pulled up this graphic. This is a nice little graphic we have for 2019. We don't unfortunately have one yet for 2020, 2021, given how crazy things were. But as you can see, the majority of our funding really goes to staffing. And we're a pretty small budgeted organization. We're under $500,000. The majority of the fund goes to staffing, rent, office, and trainings, that kind of stuff. It's a lean staff. We have right now 4 full-time staff and 2 part-time staff. The rest of the work in terms of the strategy team and work at the congregational level, it's all done by volunteer leaders. That's sort of where the money goes. And as you can see, the money comes from a combination of membership dues as well as certain foundation grants that we receive as well.
So one of the questions that we've heard is, what is the benefit of joining a collective organizing effort, a collective organization, rather than just stepping out on our own for different justice issues? And we think that one of the big benefits of joining an organization like GBIO is their emphasis on relational power, that the more that we are connected to each other in our communities and across communities, the more that we're able to get things done. So when a church becomes a member, or a mosque or a synagogue becomes a member of GBIO, they will work alongside us, and GBIO as a whole and the communities within GBIO will listen to the concerns of our community, just as we get to listen to each other. And then collectively, we get to leverage that power to enact change, to enact justice. And this is at the local level, at the neighborhood level, at the state level. We think about that image of a bunch of little fish in a school of fish that's shaped like a really big fish, and they're squaring off against a shark, and the caption says organize. GBIO is all about power building. And so when we join in that effort, we are able to offer our strengths, and then another organization, another house of worship offers their strengths and their connections. And then another one joins in and offers their strengths and their connections. And before you know it, we're able to square up to the big movers and shakers and the decision makers and say, we have this whole coalition that has been working on this issue, and here's what we think needs to happen. And we're able to network and get the right words in the right ears and make things happen. And so that's why, it allows us to join a movement that is already in motion. It also allows us to help shape that movement with the issues that are important to us and the issues that affect us directly.
What would being a formal member of the Greater Boston Interfaith Organization require of UP members? And I'm going to give my answer to this based on my understanding from discussions with the director Kathleen and from other trainings and in actions I've been a part of, but also knowing that some of this can be a little bit fluid and change as the issues change or change as the actions that are planned take shape and the particular needs of those come about. But the big thing that United Parish would need to do is, one, of course, pay dues, which would be a small portion of our annual budget. And the second thing we would need to do is have liaisons. So official United Parish liaisons who are the representatives of the congregation to the Greater Boston Interfaith Organization. And these are folks who could serve on a rotating basis, maybe elected once a year or every 6 months or something like that. And they would be folks who go to larger GBIO planning meetings, strategy sessions, listening sessions. They would help institute some of the practices of GBIO within the congregation, like one-on-one meetings, small group meetings, house meetings, to determine what issues are really salient in people's lives right now that GBIO might have an opportunity to work towards justice in. And the other thing that liaisons do is liaisons are charged with gathering the turnout from our organization to major GBIO actions. So say there was going to be a meeting with some representatives from our state Congress or the mayor's office or something like that, then GBIO might ask the United Parish to make a commitment of how many members do you think you could bring in? Say we think we can bring 30 members. Well, then it's the liaison's job to kind of rally the troops and to get the word out through our already existing stretching team probably, and to market this opportunity to work for justice together with other local congregations and institutions. And then the liaisons would, at the event itself, kind of stand up and say, we committed 30, we actually brought 35. Or in some cases, we committed 30, we got 28. And I've been at actions where liaisons greatly exceed their commitment and where they slightly underperform it. And in both cases, the reaction has been applause. And people are just grateful that there are people there to work together and to fight for justice in the Commonwealth. So these are my two thoughts based on these questions, and I hope this is some helpful background, but I also encourage you to reach out to Pastor Kent, to Pastor Amy, to talk with some of the folks from GBIO, and you'll hear a lot more about it. You'll get a lot more background, but my experience with the organization is that it's been a very impressive and effective group of people who have taught me what it looks like to work as a part of a larger organization, not just based on my own individual whims or individual strategies, but actually as a collective unit of people from across the greater Boston area working together for a common cause.
So this last question was, can an individual join GBIO? So I just brought in this question to who can be a member and how, because we unfortunately know a single individual cannot join GBIO. We are an organization of organizations, and that's how we find, we're able to build sort of the broadest amount of power. Because we have these communities of folks who are in relationship with one another, and that's a really a great way for us to really work and to build relational power through relationships, power through common cause, power through common faith, and really get things done. Of course, we're not going to turn individuals away, especially if, there are certain individuals who sort of are affiliated with an organization, kind of work with, say, the core team of a given institution. And that's, of course, wonderful. But, for the most part, we don't just take individuals alone. In terms of the requirements of membership, The basic requirements are one, a 1% dues contribution. We ask that every institution submit a 1% dues contribution. Could be $500, could be $15,000. It doesn't matter. It's really about everyone coming together in equal part and building something together. And 1%. This is also a yearly dues payment. I should mention. The second thing is we ask each institution to provide 2 liaisons. So we have a liaison system where basically representatives from each congregation come together every month. They coordinate across GBIO, whether it's a campaign that we're doing, the listening campaign, or campaigns targeting political targets, updates in terms of information, and also training, frankly, just being able to train and build your skills as a leader in your public life, and to work alongside other folks, other compelling leaders from across Greater Boston, and really, be part of this collective. It's a leadership academy at the end of the day, where it's about power building, it's about impact, it's also about leadership. And those are some of the benefits of being part of GBIO, is being part of that collective, that leadership training, the strategic and political insights that come from being part of this collective, and also sort of professional organizer help and coaching and training. These are all different sort of benefits of being part of GBIO and allowing you to better accomplish your mission in the world, and carry out your faith when it comes to your values of justice.
What is the geographical area that GBIO focuses on, and how does it balance local and state politics? So GBIO, the Greater Boston Interfaith Organization, actually has a much broader focus than just the Greater Boston area. Now, their membership is about 60 member organizations that represents over 100,000 individuals, and they organize these people and institutions at the neighborhood level, the city level, and at the state level. And so some examples of some of the local neighborhood level issues that they've taken on has been improving the safety and equipment at Jeep Jones Park in Roxbury. They negotiated the mayor's office to put $100,000 for improvements in that park into the city's 2019 budget. They have done a lot of work with the criminal justice reform bill, which is at the state level. They got, Charlie Baker to sign this legislation, which included GBIO's platform, which was a repeal of the mandatory minimums for low-level drug offenses, bail reform, reduction of post-release fees and fines, reduction of solitary confinement time. So they really do try to find a balance between some of these local issues like Jeep Jones Park or the Dearborn School, replacing the Dearborn Middle School with a massive $73 million academy for students in this underserved area of Roxbury, to more citywide issues like affordable housing in Boston, to and working with Mayor Walsh on that, to statewide issues like criminal justice reform. So they really try and think about where they can make the most impact, where they have the power to leverage change, but also what issues are affecting their member organizations across the state.
The Stretching Team is a hub for those in our community with a passion for outreach, social justice, economic justice, and making a difference in our local community and beyond. No matter what, though, we're a few members of an individual church, and the prospect of amplifying and adding our voice to a large interfaith coalition is exciting to many of us. A number of members of the Stretching Team and the broader congregation have participated in GBIO actions and watched the power and influence that hundreds of faithful people can have on the direction of our state policies. Part of joining GBIO is naming a few GBIO representatives, usually 1 to 2, to be the primary points of contact for United Parish. Those representatives may or may not regularly attend the Stretching into Justice team, but the Stretching team would be on call as a set of minds and hands to support our GBIO representatives and help disseminate information to the congregation. In practice, this would mean that our United Parish GBIO rep would email the stretching team occasionally to ask us to attend a meeting or email a local representative, and then we would report back on our action. And we would position ourselves as a fairly stable source of emailers and meeting attendees that our GBIO representative could rely on. But of course, we're also excited for all of you in the broader congregation to join us on these actions when you're able. So overall, the Stretching Ministry is passionate about how we could amplify our knowledge and impact through GBIO actions, and how we could support our UP GBIO representatives moving forward. We're also excited to strengthen our ties to the faith communities throughout Brookline who have already joined GBIO, including Temple Beth Zion, Temple Ohobai Shalom, Temple Sinai, and St. Paul's Episcopal Church. If you have further questions about the Stretching into Justice Ministry and GBIO, feel free to email stretchingintojustice@upbrookline.org.
One of the questions was, what is the demonstrated impact of GBIO's actions? And I thought I would best answer that question with a story, a brief example of a recent victory. So last year, GBIO was intimately involved with passing a statewide police accountability bill at the end of 2020, particularly in response to the George Floyd murder and the movement. And one of the most significant wins in terms of that bill, and something that was particularly impactful, was the creation of a strong police officers standard and training board. So that's a statewide civilian oversight board whose job it is to take a look at officers' certification and make sure that they're decertified when they commit misconduct, so that they can no longer practice being a police officer if they're abusing their authority. And what makes this post board particularly important is that, number one, it's community inclusive and civilian dominated. So this is not a police dominated board. It's a 6-3 civilian majority board. And two, it has real teeth. It has subpoena power, so that you can really get into police departments' records and make sure that some of the hidden stuff that they might not want to come to light does come to light, and have a little bit more accountability there. And that particular combination is not something that exists in the United States right now. So, this is a particularly significant win. There are other pieces of reform that also came along with this bill. For example, wins on use of force, banning chokeholds and the like. School resource officers are now optional in the state of Massachusetts. Let me speak to how GBIO was involved in passing this bill, though. Just to show that we're not just, it's not like we just slapped our name on the whole thing and call it a victory without really doing too much. After the George Floyd movement was a powerful moment, right? Tens of thousands of people on the street and really calling for justice. Yet it was a moment. Most of those folks went home, and the police unions, because they are organized, because they have both organized people and organized money, they remained out there, and they were there before, they're going to be there tomorrow, and they were there certainly the day after George Floyd, the movement went home as well. And they had the power to be making hundreds, thousands of calls to their state legislators to push back against any kind of reform at the state level. And GBIO is one of the few organizations that is a sort of a citizens power organization that was capable of making the thousands of calls in opposition for justice, in support of police accountability. And that was the role that we sort of played last year. Just from the very beginning, we were working in close partnership with the Black and Latino Caucus. Representative Russell Holmes requested us early on, called on us to make calls to the speaker, because he was going to meet with the speaker, and we sort of blew up his phone lines with 500 phone calls just that day alone. This was one of the more pivotal moments that convinced him that there's a lot of force behind this. There's a lot of people and voters who care. So we need to get this done. And in the summer, we mounted an in-district meeting campaign where we had public assemblies via Zoom, of course, where nearly 900 people participated in 13 meetings with 26 different reps, and told stories, educated folks around the issues, brought constituents together within the district, and ultimately, in front of all those folks, leaders were able to go up there with their state representatives and ask for public commitment. Yes or no, are you going to vote for this police reform bill? And this was pretty impactful in terms of getting a lot of different reps on board. This is all volunteer leader led. The teams the actions were all run by teams of volunteer leaders with the support of organizers like myself. So we were sort of helping out with training and a toolkit was provided so folks could kind of be able to put this thing together. But really, I mean, besides some coaching, it was leaders, pushing this forward. And in the fall, we made tons and tons of calls. At one point, we made 1,500 calls in 15 days to push the governor to actually, get this police bill passed. And we even had one representative in Brookline who shifted his position on qualified immunity, which is sort of a legal shield that police officers would use to prevent themselves from being held accountable in court. He was voting against a certain amendment around that, and then after 120 people showed up at an in-district meeting, he ended up voting yes on that particular amendment. So these are some examples of the way that organized people within GBIO have really been able to operate at a transformative level, at a level that, frankly, St. Paul's alone cannot operate. Any one of our congregations cannot operate at that level alone. But being part of this collective, you have that power. And also, I guess another piece of the impact that we make is about leadership development, is about the fact that these actions were run by ordinary people, community leaders, and folks who were able to really put this together and exercise their power and bring other people together around a common agenda. It is empowering, and it's a way for you to, when you look around the world and see so many things wrong with it, you feel powerless about the housing crisis, you feel powerless about racial injustices. You can have an impact through GBIO. Let me move forward and just really quickly mention a couple of other stories, local stories. We operate at the statewide level. We also operate at a more local level. For example, I'll mention a few. In 2015, there was an effort in Roxbury that got $73 million to revamp the Dearborn School, led by Roxbury Presbyterian Church. In 2019, there was an effort with Somali Muslim immigrant mothers in Roxbury who led efforts to secure over $600,000 in repairs to a local park. And last year, I was personally working with a group of unhoused organizers, folks who are homeless and organizing in Waltham, alongside leaders in Lexington who worshipped in Lexington, but lived in Waltham. And together we were able to bring together about 150 people on a Zoom call to push the mayor to actually fund winter shelter and public bathrooms. And we also had similar efforts in Cambridge as well. So these are some other examples of impact, but really the stories are, there's a lot of them.